Has Keir Starmer made Labour the most hated party in Britain? Let's get the thoughts on my panel. Former Conservative Minister Mark Field, and also creator of Turn Left Media, Curtis Daly, who is allegedly left-wing. So what's happened?
Is the clue in the name, we think? Or...
Yeah, so what's happened? Because do you think that Keir Starmer has managed to turn the Labour Party into a despised party?
Yeah, I think
do?
I do. They're not a popular party. I mean, look, if you look at the general election results, right, we were just discussing this backstage, unprecedented levels of seats in terms of vote share. The vote share was, what, 33%? That's not a, no one's confident about that. In fact, Keir Starmer got less votes than the last two general elections, and obviously Labour lost. It's a strange voting system we live under. It wasn't that people were confident in the Labour Party. People just did not want the Conservatives. They felt like they needed change. Now, of course, I know you're going to disagree. For me, I think that there's been a continuation. I think people, like...
So you think the Labour Party actually a continuation of the Conservatives?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, one of the things I really want to talk about, I don't think many people do, we talk about this waste in government, right? Whether it's cutting public services, they think one of the biggest wastes in government, to me, is privatisation and private contracts. Why is private companies getting into our National Health Service and making money? What's Virgin making money off of healthcare? And no political party, whether they want to talk about the UK Doge or cutting services, they never talk about that. I think that's one way we can cut waste. That is, to me, a Thatcherite policy.
How would that work, though? Hold on, let's play this through. If you think that's cutting waste, we, as the people, taxpayers, will be paying for all of it. So that'll be even worse, because we'll be paying for it.
So PFI, for example, PFI, Private Finance Initiative, which was started at John Major, but really accelerated.
I wrote my dissertation on it, actually.
So you'll know that obviously we spent money to essentially, well, we borrowed money from private companies.
It's like a build, own, operate, transfer model.
Right, so we borrowed money off these private companies,
it,
but they didn't do it for the goodness of their heart. They expect a return. So in the long run, I accept, by the way, because I'm not a big supporter of Tony Blair, short term, the NHS was doing very well because there's a huge cash injection. Patient satisfaction was quite high. But the long-term effects is we've got to pay that stuff back. So privatisation is a failed model, and voters see that. And that's why Nigel Farage, I think, is talking about steel nationalisation. I don't agree that. On some things, it's a failed model because there's no real competition. Yeah, so on monopolies, they don't work.
When there's competition. When there's a monopoly like water,
and healthcare.
You can't privatise that. And if you have a free-for-all healthcare that's paid for by the taxpayer, then how can you can privatise elements of it?
Healthcare is a monopoly, just like water, just like rail. So I think there are certain things
it's not
that
really,
left the market.
It's not really. I don't think healthcare necessarily is a monopoly, because you can have private. Well, you can have a private hospital here, a private hospital there, and you can choose which hospital you go to.
Yeah, but I can't choose. Infrastructure comes from the government.
I can't choose where I get my water from, though. The water comes from the water company which is supposedly a private company. I can't say, actually, I don't want Thames Water, I want Southern, and I'm going to have that one. You can't. So there's no competition. Mark Field.
Well, listen, having been a minister, one of the problems that we face with our civil service is so denuded of expertise. That's why we get use consultants to a very large extent. And everyone says, we want to cut the number of consultants, but we haven't got the expertise in-house necessarily to be able to properly deal with all of that. Listen, I have some sympathy with what Curtis says. I mean, I think that we went into this last election with all this talk about change, and there has, to a large extent, been continuity. And that, of course, has been Farage's opportunity to say, listen, we're the change party.
What about Keir Starmer? Let's stick with Keir Starmer. Has he made the Labour Party literally the most hated party in Britain? Do you think he has?
I think there's some strong competition on that, to be brutally honest, on the other side of the political divide. So I wouldn't blame Keir Starmer alone for that. But I think part of the problem was the expectations were so high. 33.7%, which is a losing percentage by normal, and that gave him this majority of 174, and everyone thought the world was going to change, and it hasn't.
It hasn't really, and they've literally used that majority to do whatever they like, including winter fuel and everything else. But what do you